Hi, this is my review of Shadowrun 5th edition core rulebook. Shadowrun is quite famous. It's one of the pioneers that helped define the cyberpunk genre as we know it today. It's also quite effective when combining the cyberpunk genre with the science fantasy genre. Now let's talk about the quality of the PDF. Well, the quality isn't very good, it's barely decent. Let's talk about the good parts first. The graphic design is great. The layout of the PDF is just amazing. It communicates that flavor of transhumanism, of cybernetics, of anarchy, of corporate control. It feels great, it's very thematic, and the illustrations are quite evocative. They feel gritty and pulpy. However, when it comes to the rest of the PDF, that's the organization of the rules and the explanation of the rules, everything feels a bit messy. The concepts feel too spread out, too all over the place. That is, you start reading about a particular concept or part of the rules, and they really don't finish explaining that particular concept, and then you have to skip a few pages if you want to understand more about that concept. If you start reading the book from start to finish, you're going to feel like a lot of holes or places where things could have been explained in a single paragraph, but they are kind of like spread out, and it feels too, I don't know, choppy or separated. It makes the game feel more complicated than it actually is. This is actually an RPG of medium complexity in my opinion, but it feels more complicated because of the way they try to explain the rules. And it seems to me that somebody doesn't know their geography because, or maybe the book is just too badly explained, that it appears that they don't know that Mexico is in North America. It seems like they think it's in Central America, so that's a bit, I don't know, that's a bit disappointing that they didn't get their locations or geography correctly. And well, you have bookmarks, but they're also messed up. For example, if you want to go to the section that says Game Master Advice, you click the bookmark, and it takes you like 3 or 4 pages after the beginning of that section. And let's say you want to read the all the angles, which is a piece of fiction that is inserted in this PDF, and you click all the angles, and nothing, it won't take you there. So the quality isn't really good. Well, I forgot to mention talk about the fiction of the book. It's decent. It gives you a sense or a flavor of the setting, but I think they didn't need to include too much fiction. It felt like those White Wolf RPGs where they inserted too much unnecessary fluff, and I think they could have maybe focused more on better rules explanation rather than adding these pieces of fiction. So the quality, in my opinion, isn't very good. But well, let's talk about the contents of the PDF, how the game works, and the theme. Well, the theme is quite flavorful. Some of you that don't like it when they mix fantasy into a particular setting, they aren't going to enjoy this theme, in my opinion. The basic plotline is this: in the future, corporations control almost everything, and fantastical beings such as trolls and orcs and elves suddenly reveal themselves, and humanity starts living besides them, like everything's just pretty normal. And there are many plotline elements of transhumanism, and how much you are willing to sacrifice to improve your ability to be an efficient Shadowrunner, or someone who operates within the shadows or crevices of society, because of the incredible oppressive dictatorial corporate control that is portrayed in this game. The main characters are have to participate in a lot of illegal activities, and or maybe odd jobs that aren't really seen as orthodox by other people. And so I think that the theme is communicated in a very efficient way, and it's quite colorful. But as I was telling you, maybe some of those of you that prefer a harder version of cyberpunk or hard sci-fi, maybe you're not going to enjoy that. Now let's talk about the character creation. Character creation feels very complicated because of the terrible rules explanation that I was telling you about. But you basically choose from a menu. That is, you have these columns and rows, and you assign priorities to those columns and rows. And based on those priorities, you can build maybe a very tough street samurai, or maybe sort of like a magician, or maybe a character that specializes in using vehicles very effectively. And so there's a lot of versatility when it comes to generating your character, but you won't get any over-the-top results. There is no random generation that allows you to create some overpowered characters. Some people may like this, some others may hate it, but I think it actually works pretty well. And if you want a weaker character or a stronger character, there are rules to make that happen. But overall, almost all the characters feel like they're on the same level on the playing field. They give you a sample of types and roles that you can base your character concept around. So, for example, if you could be the face of the group is the character that handles diplomatic meetings and negotiations, or you could be a spellcaster, specializes in using spells, because as I was telling you, this is science fantasy. You could be a decker or a technomancer that has to deal more with the matrix side of the game, because this RPG deals with a lot of themes of augmented reality and seeing the internet and the whole network that covers the entire planet as a sort of like a distant plane, as another dimension where the characters can physically move over there, that is project their identities to that place. So it's not exactly physical, sorry, it's more like an ethereal way of moving your conscience to that plane of existence, which is basically like the cloud, and you can alter things from there. And you also have the rigger, who is very effective at controlling and repairing vehicles, and even becoming one with the vehicle if needed. And you have the street samurai. But you're not exactly limited to those types. You can create a character that's quite decent at different tasks, but those are basically the roles that you can play. Now, when it comes to the meta types, which is quite kind of like your character race, you have humans, elves, dwarves, orcs, and trolls, and they're pretty standard in what you would expect. You would expect the elf to be somewhat fragile but skilled in magic, and the troll to be pretty tough. But the troll is actually quite expensive. You need to assign a very high priority to your meta type to choose a troll. And the trolls are quite awesome in this game. I really like them. However, that doesn't mean that the troll is going to feel like an invincible tank, because this game, in a sense, it feels really old school. The characters can die quite easily. Let's talk about you have a lot of skills, of course. They work in a pretty standard way. The basic mechanic of the game is that you roll 6-sided dice, and for every 5 and 6 that you get a hit, which would be a success in other games, and you try to get as many hits as possible. But sometimes you have limits. Your human body or dwarf body sometimes is incapable of doing some pretty exaggerated things, and so many things that you do in this game, many of the tools that you employ, weapons, or maybe something to open a high security door, they are limited by their specifications, how that piece of gear is built. So it's not uncommon for a character to always get the highest technology in equipment, but at the same time, that character could choose to augment him or herself by applying cybernetics to his body, or maybe even organic implants, use all sorts of stimulants and drugs. But everything has a price. The more of those things that you use, the more of yourself that you lose. So you have limits on on how many implants you may, or how many ways you may modify your body. And of course, you could lose your ability to use magic if you use certain implants. So everything has a price in Shadowrun. That's kind of like the slogan of the game. And I feel like this game works a lot better if you aren't rolling for everything. If you're a game master, you should assign a lot of automatic successes unless something is really risky. Then you should, or that has a very important impact on the plotline, then you should call for a roll. But in general, if you make too many checks, it's going to feel, I don't know, too cumbersome, like you're constantly rolling dice and things aren't moving along. Now let's talk about combat. Combat feels really organic. The turns can be interrupted. Initiative plays a very crucial part in combat. You see, every round it's divided in sub-rounds called initiative passes. So everybody takes their actions, and the game master takes -10 out of everyone's initiative. So, but if your initiative is above 0, you get to act again. So by using spells, implants, augmentations of different types, tactics, etc., you try to keep your initiative as high as possible, and to lower your opponent's initiative as well, so that you can act more times than your opponent. And as you get wounded, you will also have a worse initiative, so it's better to keep your initiative up at all times, and that's something to consider. So you're going to be thinking, is it better for me to unleash my firepower upon that enemy, or is it better for me to activate this spell, which allows me not only to get a better position, but I'll probably attack again later on in this initiative pass. So that's what combat is basically all about. I think it works really well, and for those that use abilities that allows them to travel across the network, or maybe even use some sort of astral projection, because magic and technology mix quite interestingly in this game. It doesn't feel like they are separated from the action. Maybe a group of player characters is protecting the technomancer, who is doing a lot of complicated operations, and it doesn't feel like they have to wait for their turn. The different character actions integrate with one another in a very efficient way, so everybody's doing their thing, but they don't feel separated, or that they have to wait for the other character to finish doing what he or she is doing. And the rules are quite complete. You have rules for almost everything, and skills, magic, how to drive a vehicle. You have lists of street gear, you have lists of all sorts of contacts and patrons, and you have pretty good game master advice. You have a random run generator, which is basically like an adventure generator, and you have a nice gallery of NPCs. And because this is a science fantasy game, you have a lot of versatility and freedom when it comes to the types of enemies you're going to face. So for example, if your Shadowrunner is constantly stealing for corporations, or maybe got hired by a corporation to fight against another corporation, you're going to be fighting corporate guards and agents. But because this is a science fantasy game, you're also going to be fighting dragons, which are incredibly powerful, pretty deadly. Maybe you'll be fighting basilisks or ghouls. Any type of enemy that you can think of, you can insert into this game, and it's going to make sense, because everything is just quite fantastical, even though it sometimes feels like hard sci-fi, but it's not. And so, well, the game is actually pretty good. The rules explanations are pretty bad, but there is actually a great game beneath all of that. And the content of the PDF is just it's quite amazing. You have 489 pages with everything that you need to run the game, and it doesn't feel like it's incomplete. Everything feels very solid, and that you can use this PDF without any of the others for a long time. And well, what do I think about this game? Well, the quality and the negative things that I talked about are quite disappointing. However, the game itself is pretty good, and I think the theme is quite effective despite the at times absurd mix of fantasy and science fiction. Everything integrates well in a pretty nice way. I wouldn't recommend it to those who don't like medium to high complexity games, because in particularly if you're planning to run this, the game master, I think he's going to he's having he has a bit of a harder time keeping track of different effects. The players could help with that, but well, in my personal experience, I felt like the game master had a bit more trouble with it. But for players, it's not as hard. So if you don't mind a bit of crunchiness, of adding modifiers and keeping track of things, and if you like cyberpunk and fantasy, you should definitely get this game. But if not, I couldn't recommend it because the explanations are quite terrible. I've seen worse, but for a company such as Catalyst that it's been around for a while, I think they could have done better. Well, thanks for watching my review. If you have any comments or questions, please let me know. See you later.